Hello and welcome to this week's Deep Dive. I'm Annie Shuttleworth. I'm a meteorologist and presenter here at the Met Office, and over the next 20 to 30 minutes I'm going to be talking everything about the weather this week, this weekend and into the start of next week. I'll also at the end be talking about when we can maybe expect to see the return of some colder weather. We'll be discussing something called sudden stratospheric warming. If you don't know what that means, hold on, I will tell you at the end. But if you've never come to one of these deep dives before, welcome along. We record them every Tuesday and we go into the depths of the weather for the week. If you're joining with our premiere, I'll be around for the next 30 minutes answering all of your questions. But if you are watching later on, please still comment. We will have a look through your comments and questions. We love to get your feedback as well. Make sure you share this video with anyone you think might be interested as well. Right, let's get started. So first of all, we're going to take a look at the weather, not here in the UK, but closer to the United States. Here you can see the US on the map here, and we've got this low pressure system here on Tuesday afternoon, this afternoon. This is what we call a nor'easter storm. That's because it affects the northeastern areas of the US. We're expecting to see some quite heavy rain, snow and some really strong winds in this area for the next couple of hours through the rest of the night and into tomorrow as well. It's very typical for this time of year. It isn't a very unusual storm, but it will probably bring some impacts there. We're not going to see the same stormy weather here in the UK, but this storm will bring an influence to the UK over the next few days. So to see what that influence will be, we're going to have a look at the temperatures. So if I zoom out, so we can see both the storm across the US and the UK here is a little bit zoomed out, but we need to take a look at the colours. So you can see at the moment across the UK we've got a mix of oranges and some blues as well. That's why it has been quite cold, particularly through the mornings in the north. In the south though, we're starting to see a bit of a change to the temperatures, and as this storm comes closer across the Atlantic, it will be dredging up this mild air, and we're going to continue to see that mild air boot out that out the way of that colder air. So much of the UK will see a pretty mild end to the week and the start of next week as well. You can see we've still got frontal systems coming across the UK though, so there will be quite a lot of rain as well. So that means we are in for a milder week here in the UK, end of the week here in the UK, but also quite a lot of rain. So let's take a closer look at the rest of the week. So we'll start with Wednesday, that's tomorrow. We're going to continue with that southerly, southwesterly wind direction, and we'll be feeling very mild, but also, as I said, it will be quite wet. We're going to see heavy bursts of rain pushing in from the south and west. There will be some quite heavy bursts, particularly Wednesday evening and through much of Thursday, when we have quite a large frontal system that will sweep across the country, bringing some heavy and quite persistent rain through the day. There's also going to be loads of low cloud as well, so it'll be quite a gloomy couple of days through Thursday and Wednesday. But then on Friday, there is a sign of something a little bit better. Those of you that are on half term this week, we had a really nice start to the half term. Even if you weren't on half term, you might have noticed how beautifully sunny it was outside on Monday. Now, we're not going to end the week on quite a sunnier note, but it will be at least a drier day than Wednesday, on Thursday, on Friday. That's because we're between two weather fronts on Friday. So you can see we've got a lot less rain, still quite a lot of cloud. It will still be feeling fairly mild as well across the UK. So, but then what happens into the weekend? Well, we are then expecting this next frontal system to push in across. If I press play, the next frontal system to push in through the course of Saturday afternoon in from the west. So probably another batch of rain, more likely in western areas through the day, and then overnight spreading into the east. But then there are signs of higher pressure developing into Sunday as well. More on that in a moment, and first of all we're just going to have a look at if that rain really means much. Obviously it means it's not that great to be getting out and about, but as it's mild it's not too bad. However, if we do see quite a lot of rain building up in the same places, that can lead to some flooding issues. So let's have a look at what sort of rainfall totals we can expect. So I said it's Wednesday and Thursday when we'll see the heaviest rain, I think. So throughout the course of Thursday, this is where we're seeing, these are the rainfall accumulations we're expecting. So you can see the UK in here, The brighter the colour, essentially the heavier rain over that 24-hour period. So you can see that across parts of Devon and Cornwall, South Wales, as well as North Wales, some northwestern areas of England as well, it's probably going to see the heaviest rain. That's showing about 30 millimetres falling over 24 hours for these areas. These might not be the exact areas that we do see it, but it's that sort of pattern. Now that in itself is not really enough to cause a huge amount of impacts, but some areas of England and Wales have already seen quite a lot of rain so far this month. So river levels are a little bit sensitive in some areas. So we will be keeping a close eye on that, but let's have a look at where we have seen the heaviest rain so far this month. This map shows how much rain has fallen over February so far. So we're on the 13th at the moment, a little under halfway through the month. So we would expect to have seen about 40 to 42% of the average rainfall for each area, but by this point in the month. So that means that most areas look a little bit drier than average. So this is the rainfall we've seen so far compared to the average, if you haven't seen these charts before. So anywhere that's white has had over 75% of its average February rainfall already this month. Anywhere that's blue, over 100% of its average rainfall as well. So you can see it's generally quite a lot of central areas of England and southern areas of England, as well as parts of South Wales. Also northern Scotland, northeastern Scotland have as well. And it's these areas of central England where the river levels are quite sensitive. So if you're in these areas through the rest of the week, you could start to see some flooding issues. We work really closely here with the Environment Agency and something called our Flood Forecasting Centre. We talk to them every day about where we're expecting the heaviest rainfall. They tell us which areas are sensitive to various rainfall, and that's how flood warnings and rain warnings get issued as well. So make sure you keep up to date with all of those details through the rest of the week if you are in those areas. But as I said, there's a sign of a change as we head into the weekend, with higher pressure starting to build in. So it does look like we'll start to see the high pressure build in through Sunday. So I think Sunday will probably be a better day than Saturday, because we're going to see that rainfall pushing in. But let's have a look at how we're expecting the pressure to change over the course of the week. When we get further ahead, we have to look at forecasts in a more probabilistic way. So we look at percentage chances of things happening. And this chart shows us the percentage chance of higher or lower pressure across the UK. If we see blues on the map, that shows lower pressure, reds show higher pressure. So over the rest of the week, Tuesday to Thursday, the first couple of columns here, we've got blues, quite a high percentage of them happening as well. That's lower pressure, that's going to be bringing all that rain for the rest of the week. But then from Friday and into at least the start of next week, we've got some reds on the map. So that's higher pressure developing across the UK. So that will bring some drier weather. Depending on where that higher pressure sits, depends where the drier weather will be. So let's have a look at where that high pressure is most likely to sit. So it's this one here, which shows us from about Sunday to Monday, we are expecting to see the high build in from the south and west, and then it will probably sit quite centrally across the UK, but probably be slightly more dominant in the south. So that's what you can see here. We've got very little rainfall in the south and that wet weather off the Atlantic pushing into more northern areas. So I think at least through the end of the weekend and into the start of next week until about Monday, Tuesday, possibly Wednesday, we'll probably see this kind of pressure pattern. With this pressure pattern, the winds go clockwise around a high pressure system. So that means you have a southwesterly or a southerly wind direction, which is quite a warm direction for us. So temperatures will be staying above average. So we've got a mild few days to come, and it's going to be staying mild well into next week as well. However, we'll probably see wetter weather coming into the north. There could be some snow over the high ground, but generally with the warmer Atlantic air, you'll see less in the way of snowfall. But over the highest ground of Scotland, there could be some snow. But by and large, we're not going to see any wintry hazards into the start of next week. And then we'll see how the pressure pattern is going to change into the second part of next week. Now you can look at how the pressure changes in a slightly different way to that first chart I just showed you. So this one shows you the different pressure pattern. This is the next 2 weeks again, starting today on Tuesday the 13th, going to Tuesday the 27th on the bottom right there. So again, it's the blues showing the lower pressure and the red showing the higher pressure. But here at least tells us a little bit more about what type of high and low pressure we will see. So starting off with the higher pressure, we're looking, we're going to be seeing through the rest of the week and into the start of the weekend, or through the weekend, start of next week, sorry. We've got obviously the orange and red colours, but the most dominant initial red colour is this one here, which the dominant colour throughout is this orange colour, which is typically centred across the UK. So that's that high pressure more centred on top of the UK, bringing us that more of a westerly wind direction, which is what we are expecting. And then that high pressure, we start to see more yellows come in from about Tuesday into Wednesday. We start to see a few more yellows come in, and that shows the Azores high moving in. That's what that yellow means. And the Azores high is that high that sits closer to parts of Western Europe, northwestern Europe, across France and Spain. So that's the chance of the high pressure pushing down to the south. So that would be sort of Tuesday and into Wednesday. So that means for our weather, this isn't the exact pressure pattern we will 100% see, but this is currently the most likely pressure pattern from about Wednesday next week. So that's this high pressure retreating back to the south. What that does is it allows a more straight westerly across the UK, quite a typical or very typical wind direction for us here in the UK. The Atlantic obviously packed full of moisture, bringing a lot of wet weather in from the west. So wet weather moving across western areas, higher pressure still centred to more closer to southern areas, so probably drier across the south, but you won't be completely away from the chance of that wet weather, but it'll probably be the far northwest that will see the highest rainfall through the middle part to the end part of next week. That's not the only change we could see next week. There could be another slight shift in the weather pattern. So we'll go back to that chart we looked at just a minute ago, that showed how the pressure will change. And you can't help but notice we see the return of those blues after the high pressure. So unfortunately, for those that do like the dry weather, it's not looking like a particularly long-lived dry spell or settled spell across the UK, as we do see the return of lower pressure dominating our weather. So the most likely setup with that lower pressure returning from about Wednesday or Thursday next week. That's the 21st, 22nd of February. So we're heading into the final week of February. Is for this dark blue low pressure to dominate, and that is more of a zonal low pressure system, which shows we would have those westerly winds coming in. So that kind of balances out that Azores high and that zonal low pressure, bringing in low pressures coming in from the west. So that would be still quite a warm direction. So all the while we're staying very mild, temperatures above average, if not or close to average for the time of year. So frosts are going to be very limited for at least the next week, possibly the next 2 weeks, possibly more closer to the next 2 weeks. However, we do start to see the influx of a different type of low pressure. You can see these become more likely. It's quite a nice trend you can see here of this slightly lighter blue becoming a bit more dominant. And then that blue is, I'll tell you what it is, it's more of a northwesterly wind pattern. So I've got an example of what a northwesterly looks like across the UK here. So here we have it. So high pressure across, the high pressure that will have started the week a bit more centrally across the UK sinks southwards, allowing that westerly, and then sinks even further south and west to allow a northwesterly wind direction to the UK. And it's only at this point that you start to see some blue numbers coming on. That shows temperatures falling below average for these north and western areas, because we're starting to get that colder influence with more of a northerly direction in the wind. Obviously it's colder to the north. In this setup, that's when we could potentially start to see a greater chance of snow across the UK. So in a northwesterly wind direction, you see snow showers, probably some frontal systems as well coming in from the north and west. So it's probably the Highlands, the higher ground in Scotland, northwest Scotland, likely to see the heaviest snowfall during this, but also parts of North Wales, Northern Ireland, northwest England as well could see some snow in these situations. You can also sometimes get some snow showers feeding in to parts of Devon and Cornwall, but it would have to be quite cold air for that to happen. So it doesn't seem likely then at least that we will see any persistent or widespread cold weather until at least the end of next week, because until then temperatures are expected to stay above average. So if you have heard reports of Arctic blasts on the way for the UK, I can tell you that we are expecting temperatures to be very mild for the time of year through the rest of this week, on the weekend and into the start and middle part of next week as well. So for the next 10 days or so, it's looking like it's going to be mild, a bit wet through the rest of this week, but then drier for a time over the weekend, end part of the weekend and into the start of next week. However, that is not the last chance of any cold weather here in the UK, as there is the chance of something called a sudden stratospheric warming. Now, sudden stratospheric warming increases the chance of some colder weather here in the UK. It doesn't mean we will see cold weather. What it does mean is that we're more likely to see blocked patterns happen to our weather. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a moment. But if a block pattern sits in the right place, that can bring an increased chance of northerly or easterly winds here to the UK, which is a cold direction at this time of year. That's coming off either the cold continent or up from the Arctic as well. So that would bring a greater chance of some snow to places that are less likely to see it at this time of year. So that'll be more southerly or easterly areas of the UK. So the sudden stratospheric warming refers to the temperature in the stratosphere. The stratosphere is above the troposphere, which is where all of our weather happens. That's what's closest to the Earth's surface. The stratosphere is about 30 miles up, or 50 kilometres. And over the winter, we get something called the polar vortex develop over the poles. And that is a circulation of winds around the poles that traps in a lot of that colder air in the stratosphere. It happens every winter and is a very well known phenomenon. However, there are times when those winds in the stratosphere can weaken or even reverse, and that means that the cold air in the stratosphere can disperse and it can start to seep out and start to have some impacts on our weather. Now, that cold air doesn't then come and directly affect the UK. What it does is change the pattern of our jet stream. So with a strong polar vortex, we will have a strong jet stream. And that is quite a typical setup for winter. A strong jet stream brings us that milder and wetter weather through the winter. But when the polar vortex weakens, it can create a more meandering jet stream or a weaker jet stream, which allows a greater chance of blocked patterns or more of northerly wind direction across the UK. Any wind direction that's not a westerly generally, so more of that easterly side, which is that colder direction at this time of year. So to find out if we're going to be seeing a sudden stratospheric warming, we have to take a look at the strength of the winds in the stratosphere, which, as I said, if they weaken, that's when we could start to see that polar vortex weaken. So let's have a look at this chart here. So this shows the wind strength in the stratosphere, and you can see it's this blue colour you want to see. You don't need to look too closely at the details, it's just this little blip that I want you to take a look at. So you can see that through the next week, or little less than a week, it looks likely that we'll see the winds weaken and then perhaps reverse. So you can see they go below zero. So that is the reversal of the polar vortex just for a time. But that could be enough for the polar vortex to reverse and weaken, and for a sudden stratospheric warming event to occur. So the weakening of the polar vortex then increases the temperature in the stratosphere, which is why it's called a sudden stratospheric warming event. Slightly misleading because it can lead to colder weather, but the stratosphere is not in contact with the Earth's surface, so that we do have the effects are not exactly the same, and also the effects don't happen immediately. It wouldn't be for another couple of weeks that we would then see that colder weather. So it does mean that into the beginning of March and into the second part of March that we're more likely to see a spell of some colder weather here in the UK. And I'll tell you why that is in a little moment. So sudden stratospheric warming events increase the likelihood of blocked patterns across northwestern areas of Europe. And depending on where that block sits, could lead to some colder weather here in the UK. So I'm going to have a go at drawing what sort of setup that could mean. So when I say a blocked pattern, I mean an area of high pressure, a large area of high pressure blocking the pattern, staying in a similar place for quite a long time. So you can see a similar weather pattern. So the area of high pressure, I'm going to draw a couple of scenarios. The area of high pressure, to bring colder weather to the UK, would probably have to sit closer to Scandinavia. So this is our area of high pressure here. Just put an H in there so you know that's the high pressure. And around an area of high pressure, the winds go clockwise. Going to make that red actually. That's better. It's a bit tappy this. The winds go clockwise, so if that high pressure sat in this sort of area or a little further north, it would bring an easterly wind direction to eastern areas of the UK and northern areas of the UK. We could also see some quite dry weather. That would mean cold nights, potentially foggy, frosty nights through the early part of March, but also a greater chance of seeing some snowfall coming in from the east. But that blocking pattern has still got to happen, and it's got to form in this place, because if that high pressure, that blocking pattern set up in a slightly different way, we might not see a pattern like this. So another example of where that high pressure could sit is perhaps if it sat to the north and west of the UK. So if we had our high pressure, actually I'm just going to put it a little bit further here. Yeah, so to the north and west of the UK. Bear with me while I get this set up. So around the high pressure, as I said, winds go clockwise. So that brings that more northwesterly wind direction, which is what I showed earlier, which is what is looking like it's more likely to, we're likely to see this weather pattern from the end of next week into next weekend. So that could bring, it is a colder direction. That does increase the chance of colder weather generally, but nothing significantly below average, and snowfall would still probably be limited to higher ground in northern areas. And in this setup as well, we would still have some unsettled weather. As I said, that means our jet stream is weaker if we have a weakened polar vortex. So the jet stream would be more meandering. So the jet stream might come round to the south. It sort of has to meander around any high pressures. So it might still mean that you'd still get wet weather coming into the south as well. And even when that high pressure is anywhere to the north and anywhere across the north, either to the northeast or the northwest, you still get this sort of meandering jet stream that might come up and bring wetter weather to the south. So from mid-March, from early March or the end of February, there is a chance that a sudden stratospheric warming event could affect our weather. It is looking fairly likely that we will see the event occur, but what that means, there's still a few steps to come. We've got to get that blocking set up, and it has to set up in a certain way to bring that colder weather to us here in the UK. But there's a chance of some colder weather across the UK into the early part of March, but also the chance of some quite wet weather persisting across the south as well. So still a lot of detail to be ironed out for the end of the month and into early March. But before then, we've still got a lot of mild weather to come. So for the time being, there is no cold weather on the way for the next 10 days or so. But we will be keeping a very close eye on it here at the Met Office. We've got forecasters here 24 hours a day, and we will be keeping you up to date, of course, in our deep dives, in our 10-day trends, and all of our latest output you can find on YouTube and across all of our social media channels. As I said earlier, I'll be here for the next 30 minutes to answer some of your comments if you are watching during the premiere. If not, I'll catch you next time, and thank you very much for joining me. Bye-bye.